This is Africa News, and rights activists warn that Boko Haram jihadists in Nigeria are targeting women and children. There are also calls for more transparency from the security forces in their carrying out of their anti-terrorism operations. Also, confirmation of the date of Ivory Coast's next presidential election comes as a new visa system is rolled out aimed at making things easier for foreigners visiting the country. And we hear from our correspondent on the ground in Central African Republic about what he's seen of the challenges faced by civilians caught up in the country's spiralling crisis. First, though, Mali's MNLA Tuareg separatist group has said that it is ending a ceasefire agreed with the government back in June. It's also threatened to take up arms once again. Now, the declaration follows a series of incidents this week that included clashes between Malian troops and protesters who invaded a runway on Thursday in order to stop the plane of the Prime Minister from touching down in the northern rebel stronghold of Kidal. Well, France 24's Alex Duval-Smith is in the capital, Bamako, and she joins us now. Alex, is this threat to this announcement to end the ceasefire by the MNLA official yet?
Georgia, it's not been made official in that it's not in writing, and the MNLA is in the habit of issuing its declarations by communique. The MNLA is very hard to read because it has I wouldn't say divided leadership, but it has a leadership that's divided between Burkina Faso, northern Mali, and Paris. And sometimes they do not speak with the same voice. So I think we have to treat it quite cautiously. At the same time, it is the furthest the MNLA has gone since signing the ceasefire agreement, which of course led to presidential and parliamentary elections.
Okay, now we saw parliamentary elections held over the weekend. How big a setback will this be to Mali's prospects for long-term peace and stability?
Well, we've yet to see the reaction from the Malian army or indeed from MINUSMA, the UN force that was on standby at Kidal Airport when the stone-throwing incident happened on Thursday. MINUSMA this evening are saying that they're monitoring the situation closely, which is as much as to say that they are taking it seriously. I think it's far too early to say that the MNLA has gone back to war against the Malian state, but I think this is a very worrying move that could indicate a move in that direction.
Thanks very much. Alex Duval-Smith there for us in Bamako. Now, in the ongoing battle against jihadist sect Boko Haram, Nigeria's military on Friday claimed to have killed more than 50 insurgents in an airstrike on one of their main northeastern bases. Hideouts were reportedly targeted in the Gwoza Hills near the border with Cameroon. Well, Boko Haram attacks have claimed thousands of lives since the group first began its fight to create an Islamist state back in 2009. On Friday, Human Rights Watch warned that one of the seldom reported consequences of the crisis was the increase in the abduction and abuse of women, the use of child soldiers by the jihadist sect. Well, Malsi Segun is in Abuja. She tells us more about the targeting of civilians by Boko Haram.
It is really difficult to say because in that part of the country, the issues of sexual issues are generally treated like taboos. And so a lot of the women that have been abducted and their families are keeping mum about these abuses, but we were able to document that they did take place from those who helped to rescue them and those who know their neighbors whose daughters had been taken away. But it was difficult to speak to these women or their family members because they didn't want to be identified because of the stigma that would arouse for them in the society. But our understanding is that it has been widespread, especially now that Boko Haram has moved into the rural areas, into the villages, and the communication has been cut off in the entire state. So it's difficult to follow, but we understand from those who have been in those villages that these abductions have been taking place. There was an incident not too long ago in the town of Benishek where Boko Haram, the sect, had stopped travelers And in this particular instance, it was simply to search for women in the public transport vehicles on that road. And they would pick out women from these buses and put them in their vehicles and drive away with them.
Now, Malsi, you're also concerned that about the anti-terror tactics of Nigerian security forces themselves.
Absolutely. Our documentation in my degree showed that hundreds of young men, including boys, had been arrested as early as May, immediately following the declaration of state of emergency in Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa states. And in my degree, where we carried out our research, we were able to document that hundreds of young men and boys as young as 10 and 12 have been taken and have not been seen up until today. And so our call is for the government to set up an inquiry to account for the whereabouts of these young men if they have not been charged to court.
Ivory Coast's president has confirmed that the next presidential election will be held in October 2015. Alassane Ouattara was appointed amidst post-electoral violence in 2010, making the settling of the date for the next polls all the more significant. Meanwhile, those travelling to Ivory Coast will, from now on, hopefully face a simpler time in picking up visas with the introduction of a new system this weekend.
Visitors to Côte d'Ivoire will be able to obtain their visa at the airport in Abidjan. The goal is to cut waiting time. The visitor, after paying €70, can have an e-visa printed at the airport, or he or she can pay €50 online and have the visa printed after presenting the receipt. The visa is valid for 3 days. For those planning to stay longer or who travel frequently to the country, a long-term visa valid for 1 year can be purchased for €130. With it, the holder has the right to come and go as many times as he or she pleases. The system is expected to process up to 200 visas per day, or between 300,000 and 400,000 per year. The Ivorian government says the system is simple and safe.
With the e-visa system, we know who is entering and leaving the country. The passport is scanned, and the information on the passport is transmitted to the DST. It's an ideal tool that will not only facilitate but revolutionize access to information in Côte d'Ivoire.
Frequent visitors to the country welcome the new system. Many believe that the new biometric visa will make the journey easier.
To coming out and go to the embassy to go and get the visa, you'll find some difficulties coming and going. So if they can provide the visa inside in the airport, I hope it is the best way and it is a good idea for the steps we have moved forward.
The introduction of the e-visa was one of the requests of foreign businessmen who complained that applications for visas took too long in cities without an embassy. Côte d'Ivoire is the 4th African country, after Kenya, Senegal and Rwanda, to introduce the biometric visa.
Campaigning for the second round of Madagascar's presidential and legislative elections kicked off this Friday. Now, that election will happen on December the 19th. 2 finalists are in the running: Jean-Louis Robinson, supported by former President Marc Ravalomanana, and Eri Radza-Narimampian, backed by transitional leader Ange Radzoel. The next leader is key to returning economic and social stability to a country that's one of the poorest in the world. France has replaced its ambassador in Central African Republic as it prepares to send more troops in to help restore order. Now, the country has spiraled further into violence and disorder since former Seleka rebels overthrew the then president in March. Serge Moussetti, France's ambassador, is being replaced after less than 2 years in the country. Earlier this week, France announced plans to deploy another 10,000 troops to CAR, where religious clashes have raised fears of sectarian massacres. France 24's Farouk Atiq is in the west of the country. He tells us more about what he's seen of the difficulties faced by civilians there.
At the moment, I'm sitting in Bosangwa, one of those cities in the north, which have been really affected by the conflicts between the Muslim community and the Christian Muslim community. And so, one of the most concern is, of course, to stabilize some peaceful situation, because at the moment there is no sign of stability. And of course, we have this format. You just told that minutes ago. We have this format situation. We have this format presence, around 300 people here in the Sangora region, trying to pacify the situation. But at the moment, the most important need is, of course, to have no more aggressions, no more difficulties between those two communities. We have been this afternoon, for example, 80 kilometers from here, south of Bosangwa, in the road of Bangui, and we have met anti-Balaka groups. This is all auto-defense groups of the villages that have been attacked months ago by the ex-Seleka rebels. And we have talked to these people. There were 3 men on the road, and they told us that the rest of the village has been keeping kilometers away from the village because they were afraid being attacked by the ex-rebels.
Farika Teague there for us in Central African Republic. That does, though, wrap up African News for me. I will be back with more on Monday, Annette.
Thank you very much, Georgia. That's Georgia Calvin-Smith. And do stay with us, because after a short break, I'll be back with more international news.